Hi, I'm Dixie, and when I found this embroidered cotton fabric while searching for my Jo March dress fabric, I knew this border design would work perfectly for a certain style of dress from the late 19-teens. Lingerie dresses were frilly white cotton or linen summer dresses made with lots of insertion lace or embroidery and tucks, and were all the rage in the Edwardian era. They waned in popularity by the late 1910s, but they can still be found into the 20s. I finished this lingerie dress from around 1908 a couple years ago after toiling away at it for years. It is an incredibly intricate design with tucks and yards of lace, but I swore I would never do something that obnoxiously difficult ever again until this fabric. See, the pre-embroidered edge basically does all that work for me. However, I only have about 5 yards, and that's all there was. So that translates to 10 working yards for the scalloped edge, which might seem like a lot, but my main inspiration was this dress from Patterns of Fashion 2. It's dated to about 1915 to 1916. These years were a little odd because after 5 years or so of very narrow hobble skirts ballooned out again. But that only lasted a couple years before they shrunk back down. Most middle or working class people probably never even caught on to this trend because it was over so soon and it was seen as a wasteful use of fabric during really solemn wartime period. The 1910s are one of my favorite eras in fashion, but I've never sewn a full costume for it until now. I started working on the skirt first because I figured that'd be easiest. I knew from the get-go I wouldn't have enough fabric to do 4 skirt ruffles like in the original, so I settled on 3. After analyzing the original drawings, I learned that each ruffle is lined with a layer of net. These support layers either aren't as gathered as the outer ruffles or aren't gathered at all, and they're slightly curved, which tells me the fabric for this dress was likely embroidered specifically for this dress and not cut from a pre-embroidered fabric like mine. So my ruffles will just be rectangular strips. As I debated what would be the best way of drafting the lining, I thought a circle skirt style might work, specifically a quarter circle skirt. I used the by hand London circle skirt calculator, but adjusted the results to my own final skirt length, which was 32 inches. So this is the front half of my circle skirt design, which I divided into thirds and tweaked a bit by making it slightly more narrow at the bottom and slightly wider at the hips. If you've got a large difference between your waist and your hip measurement, like I do, quarter circle skirts can be a little tight. I added seam allowances and transferred the 3 pattern pieces to a printable document. Now, since I hadn't worked in my sewing room in a while, before I could get going, I had to clean up. Remember this abandoned petticoat from my Jo March dress? And this is a scroop petticoat I intended to make to go under this dress. You've seen me make the longer version before, but spoiler alert, I did not finish it. With the pile on my sewing table a little smaller, I printed and assembled the skirt pattern and cut those pieces from some plain cotton batiste. These will be the lining layers. I had to consider a closure, and I went with a hook and eye placket on the right side, so I cut 2 strips of cotton along the selvage. The selvage will help give the placket strength, and for some extra help, I cut a strip of stronger muslin to sandwich in between the layers. For the ruffles, I ripped the fabric for a nice clean edge. 2 of the ruffles took up one entire 5-yard side of the fabric. The other ruffle took about half of the other side. That means I have to be extra careful about how I use the remaining border edge for the bodice. Each ruffle is about double the length of the lining tier it is paired with, so the skirt gets floofier on the way down. I serged the edges of my seam allowances because I wanted to be able to machine wash this dress if necessary. I know we all have personal limits as to how historically accurate we want our costumes to be. For me, if it looks legit from the outside, I'm okay with that. But the insides need to be practical, fast, easy, or all of the above. I marked halfway and quarter points along the tops of my ruffles before gathering. If you try to gather really long strips of fabric, like my longest tier was 120 inches, you run the risk of getting tangles and snapping threads. Instead, I gathered it in shorter sections for more control. Then hemmed the bottom of the skirt lining and paused to work on my hat. I found this hat at an antique mall last year. I'm always on the lookout for woven style straw hats. The sticker inside said it was made in Ecuador, and all I had to do was flatten out the brim and it produced this quintessential late 1910s, early 1920s shape with the deep crown that sits close to the head with the downturned brim. The event I was preparing this outfit for was orange themed. Obviously my dress is not orange, but I figured I could decorate my hat on theme. I bought some orange ribbon and vintage flowers on Etsy and went to work putting them into place. First, I pleated the ribbon and tacked it down in a couple places. For the flowers, I played with the placement, tucked the stems into the ribbon. I formed the rest of the ribbon into a couple decorative loops, tacked that down, and clipped the tail of the ribbon. Finally, I tacked in the flowers. I didn't want to use any glue here because this is such a good hat that I could easily retrim it later for a new look, and I wanted to leave my options open. And that was it for the hat. Way easier than building a hat base from scratch. All right, it is April 5th. My event is on April 17th, but I have a friend coming into town this weekend. It's Easter weekend. And then right after Easter, I'm going to be gone for 3 days to a place that I guess you'll see soon. So that leaves me very little time to finish this dress. At first, I thought I would do a one-piece dress, and then I was like, it would be more efficient and easier if I did 2 pieces. That way I could have a separate just shirt waist if I wanted to. And I knew that because I didn't have enough fabric to do the double layers of ruffle over the top of the bodice and the sleeves, that I thought, well, what if I did the armistice blouse, which is a pattern from Folkwear Patterns, which I've never used, but it's basically the idea that I'm going for, and it would be a more efficient use of the rest of the border fabric that I have. But I was also still looking at the original drawings, and I do want to incorporate the cut-on sleeve, and the armistice blouse does not have that. So I was thinking, okay, what if I draft something that would work better? The original dress has a kind of standard lining underneath, with the cut-on sleeves just being an overlayer. I'm wondering if I could take a dress or a shirt that I already have that fits, do the underlayer, and then draft on top of that the cut-on sleeves. This is a modern pattern that I've already fitted to me, and I'm going to speed through this process because I did all this work moving these darts to match the design of the lining of the original dress, only to remember I don't need a fitted waistline if I'm changing this bodice to be a separate shirt. So I moved that volume back down to the waist again and made a note to cut the hem 7 inches longer. I also split part of the center front away to make the button placket. This section was incorporated into the lining of the original dress, but I figured it'd be easier for me to have it separate. And I'm pretty excited about these buttons. These are antique porcelain buttons left over from my mid-Victorian work dress. But before I could cut out my fabric, we hopped on a plane. So this is some big news. We bought a house. We're not moving out of Texas, but we did buy a tiny little place in my husband's hometown in the Midwest. It had been on the market for a long time, so we got a good deal, and it's just a simple, modest, very petite little home from the 1940s with some nice original character and some pretty flowers growing in the garden. It'll be a place for us or other family to stay when we visit from out of town. We flew up here to close on the house and to take a look around and plan, and we'll be back to spend a couple of months there later this summer. We'll need to furnish this house and do a few functional updates, so I will definitely be sharing more on that later this year. I have a vision of filling the space with vintage and antique pieces and making curtains and adding art and all of that, so please subscribe if you want to follow that journey. All right, I am back from my trip, And it is Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I have 4 days, 3 days max to finish this entire outfit. And I have not even cut out the bodice or the shirtwaist portion of this dress. So while I was gone, I realized I don't think I need to have a lining, which means I could just adjust these lining pieces to have the cut-on sleeves and just cut out the whole pieces like that. So then I would have one back piece cut on the fold, two fronts, and two rectangle button center front pieces. So I need to do some measurements of my arms to see how long the sleeves need to be. So to convert a set-in sleeve armhole to a cut-on sleeve, you have to make a few changes. You can't just extend the shoulder line down. You need to raise it up a little bit to give your arm more room to roll around. On that same note, you have to lower the underarm point pretty significantly and also curve it. With a set-in sleeve, you'd actually cut the sleeve closer to your body to allow more range of motion, but it doesn't really work that way with a cut-on sleeve. With a cut-on sleeve, you have to deal with having more fabric in the arm side area, which can create some bunching, while also having less inherent range of motion. So you gotta add more room in the armhole. Also, the back and front sleeves aren't necessarily going to match because the armhole shapes for front and back are different. But I did make sure that they matched at the wrist. I cut this layer out of the same batiste as the skirt lining and quickly sewed it together, and it fits pretty good. Like, good enough I'm gonna go with it. The arm seam is twisting inward a little bit, which is definitely a problem you can face with this type of sleeve. The direction of the wrinkles tells me I could probably tweak the top seam line more, but it's not bad enough to convince me to cut an entirely new piece, which I don't have time for that anyway. Next, I needed to measure how long and wide to cut my bodice ruffle. And since I don't have enough to extend the ruffle all the way down my back, I decided to go for a sailor collar style. Luckily, I did have enough length to do this part, but not enough left to make sleeve ruffles. Before committing to cutting that, I prepped the center front button plackets. Again, I added a layer of muslin as an interfacing because the batiste is so thin. Okay, it's now or never. I have to cut this embroidery. I pinned the strip to the front and mitered the corners at the back. I trimmed the excess fabric around the neckline as well. I sewed and finished those mitered corners, then attached the whole ruffle to the bodice. Again, serging the edges for that clean finish. After that, I added the button plackets, but I did shorten them and slim them down because I didn't like the way they aligned on my body. Time for buttons. And I did the buttonholes by machine because time. So it is Saturday now. I am down to the wire. I actually have my nephew downstairs babysitting my daughter. So I can work for like 4 hours on this. I was able to get some stuff done this morning. And now I need to work on the sleeve ruffles. So I don't have enough of the border fabric to make the ruffles, but I still wanted to do some kind of ruffle. So I have a little bit left of just the flowers. I thought I could cut those into strips and gather those up. But then I'm calling this bodice done. I still need to hem it, but that is on the last part of the list because that won't be seen. Next, I really do have to finish the skirt closure on the side. For a quick skirt closure, I used my handy dandy hook and eye tape. And as you can see, once it's installed, it's nice and hidden. Lastly, I needed to cut, or tear, a waistband, this time from cotton muslin. I wrapped that all around the topmost tier of the skirt and sewed through all of the layers. Then I wrapped the other side of the waistband around and stitched in the ditch to secure it. The final step was to add one more hook and eye on the waistband. I am absolutely head over heels in love with this look. I love the floofy skirt, the shorter hemline, the sailor style collar, the dainty buttons. The only thing I would have tweaked would be the fit of the sleeves, but they're not tight on my arms, which is pretty important, so I don't really see it as a big deal. I would have loved to add more layers of the border embroidery, but for 5 yards, I feel like I made the best of what I had. The DFW Costumers Guild met up at a local antique mall with a tea house inside. After lunch and tea, we shopped around. I bought this 1949 issue of Better Homes and Gardens, some inspiration for the new house. And I bought this beautiful antique beaded bag from my good friend Laura Ingalls Gunn. I'll link to her channel in the description. In the future, I want to make a proper sash belt for the dress. This one I made years ago for my 1780s chemise gown. I would also like to make that petticoat to go under it. None of my other petticoats are short enough, but it still looks good without it. I also need a new corset cover because you can definitely see the stripes of my corset through this thin batiste. I wore my 1903 corset cover with this, but the neckline is too tall, so I had to pin the top part down. Until then, I could wear this without a corset and petticoat, and it looks almost like a modern dress. I can't wait to make more 19-teens garments. It really is a lovely time period in fashion. Thank you so much for watching. Give this video a thumbs up if you love 1910 style as much as me, and subscribe if you want to see more costuming content. Until next time, happy sewing!